when this regime finally falls, and one day it will, Iranians and Israelis will be great friends once again. I wish the Iranian people success in their noble quest for freedom.
You're listening to Inside Israel Today with Gil Hoffman on the Land of Israel Network.
Hello and welcome to Inside Israel Today, here on the Land of Israel Network, on the landofisrael.com. It's Tuesday morning here in rainy Jerusalem. There were prayers last week for rain, and God listened to those prayers, and so we're all wet. But we're happy over here in Jerusalem because we desperately needed that rain in Israel. The agriculture in Israel needed it very bad. And as the nephew of wonderful farmers here in the land of Israel, I'm very happy that they will get that nourishment that they need for their crops. And so luckily I don't work outside in the rain. I work in the Knesset, in the Parliament building, where the temperature is always just right. At least in the air, among the people, it tends to get overheated. And so yesterday was very much no exception. There's been a wonderful trend in the Knesset yesterday. I've been going on lately. I have been covering the Knesset for close to 20 years now. And only recently did the members of the media start rebelling. We've been covering faction meetings for that entire time. Each party in the Knesset has a faction of Knesset members, and they meet every Monday afternoon in order to talk about their priorities for the week, but also in order to have their leader, maybe some others, but usually just their leader, speak to the press. And we've been going and listening to them and writing down what they've said until some of the media said, wait a second, this is a different era now. They can just send a video. We don't really have to actually go if they're just going to speak to us. They need to allow us to ask questions. That's what we do. And you know what? It's been wonderful. It allows me to be able to show the world that I really work. I have told the Jerusalem Post in my articles every Tuesday morning, I'm usually online by Monday evening, because I get to ask questions every week to our Defense Minister, Avigdor Lieberman, our Education Minister, Naftali Bennett, and the leaders of the opposition, Yair Lapid and Avi Gabay and Tzipi Livni. And it's been a lot of fun getting to be the one asking those questions. And so ahead of yesterday, when I was about to go to the Knesset, I was at the office of the Jerusalem Post, and the editor-in-chief, Yaakov Katz, barges into the room where one of the news editors was, Eli Walgalanter, and he says, "Throw out every story today that's not about Iran." Now, he didn't really mean it, but he was serious that he wanted the Iran issue to be the focus of today's Jerusalem Post. And I have the front page of the paper in front of me, and apart from a very nice story about the relic from the First Temple era, an earth near the Western Wall, that the mayor of Jerusalem, who may or may not be running for re-election as mayor, and I got a nice picture holding on the cover of the paper. Besides that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 stories about Iran, and one that kind of got cut off, I see, and is on another page. So we are taking that Iran issue very seriously. And so even though I intended to ask other questions to the politicians yesterday, instead I did what Netanyahu says are the 3 most important things in the world. I asked about Iran, Iran, and Iran. Okay? So there was a problem, though. There was a message that went out to the politicians in Israel which said, don't talk about Iran. We have to be careful. That's a sensitive subject. We don't want those protesters to think that they're doing this for us. We want those protesters to be encouraged, and anything that Israelis say might get in the way. And so first I spoke to Avi Gabay. He apparently didn't get that memo. And he said we have to, yes, I want those protesters to succeed. But after that, Yair Lapid and Naftali Bennett, who fought miserably yesterday, agreed. When I asked them to say something to the people of Iran, they said it's better for us to say nothing. And I thought this was kind of weird because Naftali Bennett spoke for a very long time yesterday about how we need to remove the costume of Yair Lapid, who's pretending to be a right-winger and really has the views of Meretz, really supports a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. And then he went and said the exact same thing about Iran that Lapid did, which is nothing. And so I tweeted after that, well, so if Naftali Bennett and Lapid are the same thing and Lapid and Meretz are the same thing, then Naftali Bennett equals Meretz. Not exactly, but you can have that kind of logic. One other thing that Avi Gabay said to me was he said that the protesters send a message to all the rulers in the region that they have to listen to the needs of their people. Now, I personally, I didn't get to talk to him afterward, but I don't think that Avi Gabay was referring to the rulers of the Arab countries in the region. I think that he was actually referring to Netanyahu when he said that. And Netanyahu is very much a ruler over here, even though he's been democratically elected 4 times. He seems to certainly not be going anywhere. And so after Bennett and Lapid and initially Michael Oren as well said to me, sorry, I can't talk about Iran. What happens? Netanyahu starts talking about Iran. Netanyahu had been silent on Iran, decided to put out a video in English, which he then posted on his Farsi website with Farsi subtitles. And so I don't have the Farsi version of it, but here is Netanyahu's video in English.
I heard today Iran's President Rouhani's claim that Israel is behind the protests in Iran. It's not only false, it's laughable. And unlike Rouhani, I will not insult the Iranian people. They deserve better. Brave Iranians are pouring into the streets. They seek freedom. They seek justice. They seek the basic liberties that have been denied to them for decades. Iran's cruel regime wastes tens of billions of dollars spreading hate. This money could have built schools and hospitals. No wonder mothers and fathers are marching in the streets. The regime is terrified of them, of their own people. That's why they jail students. That's why they ban social media. But I'm sure that fear will not triumph, because the Iranian people are smart. They're sophisticated. They are proud. Today they risk everything for freedom. Sadly, many European governments watch in silence as heroic young Iranians are beaten in the streets. That's just not right. And I, for one, will not stay silent. This regime tries desperately to sow hate between us, but they won't succeed. And when this regime finally falls, and one day it will, Iranians and Israelis will be great friends once again. I wish the Iranian people success in their noble quest for freedom.
Okay, that was Netanyahu speaking in English to the world with subtitles in Farsi, which is the Persian language spoken there in Iran. And so Netanyahu, I guess, decided that after Rouhani started it by saying that Israel is behind the anti-government street protests in the country, Netanyahu felt he had to respond by saying that those charges are not only false, but laughable. And so I'm glad that after that, the politicians didn't mind speaking as much. I couldn't go back to Naftali Bennett and to Yair Lapid and get them to speak about Iran after that. And actually, spokesman for Lapid said, we still think it's stupid to talk, even though Netanyahu did. But Michael Oren, whose new spokeswoman initially said, no, we're not supposed to say anything about Iran, said, okay, fine, you can talk to him. And what Michael Oren told me, which is on the cover of today's Jerusalem Post, I think is fascinating. He said that former U.S. President Barack Obama chose to not support the 2009 Iranian Green Protest movement because he hoped to reach a deal with Iran on its nuclear weapons that he signed 6 years later. Now, we're talking about a very serious failure by Obama to not support these protesters. One of my favorite quotes that there's been here over the last decade was Natan Sharansky, the Soviet dissident, the ultimate protester for human rights in the history of mankind, said that the failure of Obama to support these Iranian protesters back then was the biggest failure to help human rights in modern history. Wow. And so maybe now we know the reason. Just like Michael pointed out that Obama didn't support the Iranian people, he did a lot of different things, putting the Iran deal first. He didn't stop, according to the political website, Hezbollah from smuggling cocaine into the United States. He didn't say anything when Michael himself was targeted for assassination on the streets of Washington by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, as was the Saudi ambassador at the time. He didn't stop the missile boats of the Iranians from provocatively approaching American destroyers. And he didn't keep to the red line that he set in Syria on chemical weapons being used against the Syrian people. According to Michael, Obama did all of that because he wanted to reach out to the Iranian leadership. He wanted to make a deal with them. He saw that as the key. He saw that as the solution to the problems in the Middle East. And now what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, is we can take that all back. All that approach that Netanyahu and the people of Israel said all along was such a terrible, dangerous, awful mistake that caused untold suffering throughout the Middle East and the world can now, little by little, be taken back. And again, as we've said on this program many times, you don't have to like Donald Trump personally. You don't have to like his domestic policies in the United States. You certainly don't have to like his treatment of women, nor do you have to like Bill Clinton's treatment of women. But his policies on Israel, we have to appreciate, and the wider Middle East as well. So Michael said when I asked him about the difference between Obama and Trump on the protesters, he said that that's quite a difference, isn't it? Trump has tweeted 5 times supporting those protesters. And that is a very, 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 very different approach than Barack Obama had. And so now we're seeing that having this very different approach in the White House, maybe it can lead to something. Maybe it can lead to those protesters knowing that the world is behind them. I mean, unfortunately, we haven't heard Europe saying anything except for Boris Johnson a little bit. But then again, Europe and the Western world has been pretty much on vacation over the last few days. They're just getting back to work in a few hours. Maybe they'll say something. The people of Iran deserve their support. The people of Iran deserve human rights. The people of Iran deserve to have money going to them. As Carolyn Glick pointed out in the Jerusalem Post today, since the deal that the world reached with Iran, which gave huge amounts of money to the Iranian regime, it hasn't trickled down to the people. Instead, that money was used to fund terror all around the world. The budget of Hezbollah in Lebanon and Syria that it receives from Iran was quadrupled, Carolyn pointed out, from $200 million to $800 million per year. Why did that happen when the people of Iran are desperate for food, when the price of vegetables has suddenly skyrocketed, as well as chicken. I keep kosher, but I go to Persian restaurants when I'm in LA, and they're wonderful, and they make great chicken. The price of rice has gone up by a lot. Persians make darn good rice. And I think providing the Iranian people with cheaper rice is so much more important than providing money to Hezbollah to use to kill innocent Syrian people and to kill Jews if they could. And so this is the time that we can start walking back that Obama strategy of supporting regimes like Iran rather than reaching out to the people. The first meeting between Netanyahu and Obama in the White House, one of the reasons why it went so bad was that Obama said to Israel that you've got to be reaching out to the regimes, not the people, while Netanyahu was saying the opposite. Netanyahu was saying you need to have a grassroots approach. Reach out to the people, not to their corrupt dictatorships. You need to have a bottom-up kind of approach to making peace in the Middle East. Improve the lives of the people, economic peace. Start with the economy, and that will lead to peace. And so now that the main obstacle to peace in the Middle East, Barack Obama, has been removed, and again, it didn't have to be Trump that would replace him, but anyone would make it easier to have there be a peace process. Now, you're going to have what Netanyahu said to Obama and he didn't listen to back then, 10 years ago, now implemented. You're going to have a regional economic approach to solving the Middle East conflict that's going to get into high gear in 2018. Happy New Year, by the way. Whether the Palestinians like it or not, and they have every reason to like it, to be honest. You're talking about money that'll be flowing in from around the world to build up that Palestinian Authority and perhaps Palestinian state economically. You're going to have the Saudis taking a very serious role in moving that process forward. We have a different world right now where it's not the Arabs against the Jews anymore. It's the moderates against the extremists. Israel is together with the Saudis, the Egyptians, and the Jordanians, relative moderates among the Muslim countries in the region, going against the Iranian regime that wreaks havoc and encourages terror all around the world. And with that approach, lives can get better for the Palestinians, for Israeli Arab citizens, for Arabs throughout this region, and for the people of Israel as well. And maybe that can lead to the terror that has been spreading more around the world finally decreasing. And maybe Europe and America can finally become safer as well after they became more dangerous with the mistaken policies that there were before. So good luck, Iranian protesters. I don't know if you're listening here on the Land of Israel network. I don't know, do we have a Farsi Land of Israel network? Can we add Farsi subtitles to my YouTube audio video thing that they put out? I'll have to ask Ari and Jeremy. I think that should be our investment. It is what it is. So stay with us. We'll have more excitement from Inside Israel today after the break.
Hi, this is Eve Harrow, host of Rejuvenation on the Land of Israel Network. You can hear a new show from me every Sunday, and every day of the week, shows from another one of my very talented fellow show hosts. Reach me, Eve, at thelandofisrael.com, and keep listening, everybody. We love your feedback. The Land of Israel, coming at you every day, every week. That's the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com.
And we're back here on Inside Israel today on thelandofisrael.com, where I've had a fun week over here covering Israeli politics. I enjoyed going to the Likud Central Committee on Sunday evening. It was the first ideological meeting of the Likud Central Committee in years. And Netanyahu supports a Palestinian state, though he got the Likud Central Committee to vote against one before he was in favor of a Palestinian state, which led to Ariel Sharon leaving Likud and the formation of Kadima. But since then, I don't remember another ideological meeting of the Likud Central Committee, and the rest of the Likud, especially its activists in the Central Committee, do not support a Palestinian state. And it was time for them to come out and say what they're in favor of. Now, for several years now, there have been two very nice ladies. Their names are Nadia and Yehudit. They are the founders of an organization that for many years was called Women in Green, until I think they realized that there was a Women in Green or something for environmentalists in America from the 60s, and they couldn't use that name. So they call themselves Women for Israel's Tomorrow, but in Hebrew still Nashim Beyarok, and Women in Green. And when they started talking about needing to apply sovereignty to Judea and Samaria, I laughed at them, people laughed at them. Come on, set more realistic goals. It's not going to happen. And they told me, yes, it will, little by little. And they met with politician after politician and persuaded them that that should be the plan, that the left had a plan. The left wanted to withdraw from the overwhelming majority of the West Bank, create a Palestinian state there with Jerusalem as its capital. That's the left's plan. The right didn't have a plan. The right had a lot of ideas. If you want to hear about the 7 different ideas, read Yishai Fleischer's New York Times article about that. I highly recommend it. They said the plan should be sovereignty, applying Israeli law to Judea and Samaria. Okay? That means that the Jews living there will be subject to the same laws that the people of Israel that live within the pre-67 border have. There's a lot of laws that, for technical reasons, have not been implemented because that technically the generals and not the government control Judea and Samaria. And that is what they're asking to change. Now, I was at that event, and for 2.5 hours, I never heard one word. That word was annexation. Annexation is something different, ladies and gentlemen. Annexation means taking full control over all the land. That means canceling the Oslo Accords. That means dismantling the Palestinian Authority. That means controlling every single Arab in Ramallah and telling him how he should live his life. Being in charge of his schooling, his work, his taxes, his garbage collection, every little thing that Israel has not dealt with since the mid-1990s. Annexing would mean Israel having to patrol security-wise, police-wise, every single inch of where all the Arabs live in their cities. And that's not what they voted on unanimously to approve at the Likud Central Committee. And then what happens the following day? Haaretz. Likud votes for annexation. AFP, ruling party of Netanyahu, calls for adopts annexing West Bank. Ooh, big scary headline. Suddenly, if we annex the West Bank the way we did Jerusalem? No, we have not. And that headline was the main headline for 24 hours on Yahoo News. Nothing happened, ladies and gentlemen. This is a party calling for not annexation, but for applying some technical laws that apply in Israel to Israelis that are over the pre-67 border. The Likud is not the government. The Likud Central Committee is not the security cabinet. The Knesset has not made any such vote. Maybe it will soon, but they're not. And so nothing has actually changed. Annexation did not happen, and annexation is not the same thing as applying sovereignty. And so, ladies and gentlemen, get your news from the Jerusalem Post. Never mind that there was a wrong headline on my story on Friday that used the word annexation. But now we know the truth. Another experience this week in covering politics is what happened at 11 o'clock last night. I'm sorry, I wasn't still at the Knesset at 11 o'clock last night. And anyway, our print edition was closed. I did write for the internet later on, though. the Knesset passed the primaries bill. Okay? The primaries bill would basically says that the state will fund politicians in internal elections. If you run for a Knesset seat in the Likud, if you're an incumbent, you will receive funding. If you are not an incumbent, you can receive a loan that you wouldn't have to pay back if you got elected. But if you lose, you will have to, which is quite a risk. That primaries bill also basically says that it's now going to be illegal to receive political donations in Israel. This is a very big deal. The way it's worked from the very beginning of the state is you want to run for Knesset, get your own money, raise it. You couldn't raise very much. There were limits. You couldn't take too much from any individual person, which is what prevented individual people from having too much power over politicians. But you raised your own money. That's what politicians do. It's not easy. It's not fun. But, grow up. Do it. Until along came the new chairman of the coalition, David M. Solomon, said, I don't want to do that. I can understand why he wouldn't want to do that. Raising money means building up relationships. That's what politicians do. He does not have a particularly good personality. He doesn't work well with people. People meet him and they don't like him. And that's not really good for a politician. Asking for money is like the hardest thing you can do as a politician. You want to have people really like you if they're going to give you money. And so he went and he got it canceled. He's the chairman of the coalition. He's a powerful guy. If other politicians want their bills passed, they got to support his bill. That's the way it works in politics. It passed. And there's another tragedy with that end of an era that is different, I think, for our listeners here on the Land of Israel Network and my readers of the Jerusalem Post than, say, the readers of Yediot Achronot. Because the readers of the Jerusalem Post and the listeners to this radio station are primarily in the United States. And the way it worked for many politicians is they chose purposely to not raise money among Israelis, because that creates conflicts of interest. They decided to raise money in America. And their fundraising in America was a way in which American Jews got involved in Israeli politics. One thing I've always done at the Jerusalem Post is encourage our readers to be a part of what's going on. We encouraged Anglos to run for Knesset. Whenever an Anglo ran for Knesset, even if they didn't have a chance, we gave them articles in the Jerusalem Post. We tried to keep people as informed as possible. We tried to keep people informed when there were websites of parties and politicians in English. And donations, it's just one of the many ways for American Jews to be connected to Israel. And it's worked beautifully. There are donors from among American Jews on the left that influenced Israeli politics. And there were donors on the Israeli right who influenced Israeli politics by giving donations, especially in the Likud party through the organization American Friends of Likud. And I don't know how much the politicians are going to still want to talk to these American Jewish donors now that they don't need them anymore. And that's really sad. I want American Jews and politicians to interact. I really hope that it will continue to happen without money being a part of it. But money is the way the world works these days, unfortunately. So let's hope it still goes on, but it might not. And it's a darn shame. So, but you can still stay connected to Israel by listening here day in and day out to the Land of Israel Network on thelandofisrael.com. This has been Gil Hoffman telling you what's going on inside Israel today. Have a wonderful day from here in rainy Jerusalem. Bye-bye.